Good morning. Welcome. Yes, Lex is looking a little different this morning. He got his hair done, but we are sadly missing him, and we're going to do our best without the head honcho here. We have a really exciting show, actually. We're going to talk about ARM IPO, and we're going to look behind the curtain and see if what's happening around it. We're going to zoom out. We're here with Paulina today, and she has the ins and all the details that you're going to need to know on that. And so thanks for coming, Paulina, and this is going to be quite an exciting show. So stay tuned. Hey, Paulina.
Good morning, Molly.
It's just the girls today.
Yep, I'm excited to chat with you today.
So I know we only have you for just a bit, so let's jump in. So tell us about what's happening with give me a second, huh? What's happening with ARM today? So what's happening with the IPO and give us the world of it.
Yeah, absolutely. The ARM IPO is very hyped. This is all everyone can talk about this week. So I thought it would be a perfect topic to break down, on what's happening with the most highly anticipated IPO of 2023. So I'll start by giving a bit of background around the company, because if you are very well versed in the artificial intelligence space, you probably have heard about the company. But if you haven't, then this could be your first time learning about it. So ARM is a UK company. It develops and designs and licenses out its high performance semiconductor chips. And the way ARM essentially makes its money is by charging a license fee and royalty to other firms that use its technology, which build out chips for their own products. And this is pretty different than other semiconductor companies, which tend to manufacture their own products. But ARM's IP, its intellectual property, is used in smartphones. Actually, the estimate is that its designs are used in about 99% of all smartphones, but it's also used in things like cars, personal computers, servers, and its IP is purchased by some of the largest companies in the world, like NVIDIA, Apple, Samsung, Google. So we have some big names behind this company, and it went public yesterday, and investors have been super excited about this IPO. It was valued at almost $60 billion at the open yesterday, and it's the largest initial public offering since Rivian went public back in November of 2021. And it ended the trading day yesterday with a market cap of 65 billion, where shares jumped around 25% at the end of the trading day. So that's a little bit of background and kind of what happened in its huge market debut yesterday.
And what's its overall structure? So who owns it? How is it financially doing? How was it when it was jumping into the IPO?
Yeah, so SoftBank, which is a Japanese multinational investment holding company, is ARM's parent company. So SoftBank has roughly 90% of the company of ARM and controls most of its shares. And a little bit of history here, which I think is relevant. SoftBank bought ARM for $32 billion back in 2016. And the plan was to sell it to NVIDIA for $40 billion in 2020, but that deal fell through because there were some regulatory issues. But looking at the company's financial health, ARM has a really strong balance sheet. Its market share in the chip space is really dominant. And in this era of artificial intelligence, it appears that ARM is pretty well positioned to garner a lot of investor support and interest.
Okay, and then so they were having the reason that deal fell through with NVIDIA is that I think in February 2022, I think, it fell through due to antitrust. And so if NVIDIA was going to, come together with that, but what was interesting to see was that in that very same month, when that deal fell through, ARM elevated to CEO Rene Haas, which is a veteran. He's a veteran of NVIDIA. So we might want to look at this separation of powers there to see if they actually are separate or, just on paper. And it's really interesting, the fact that there's an IPO at all. How is that market looking? So is IPOs have dried up? Are they looking to come back online? Are we going to see more?
Yeah, well, to your first point about mentioning Rene Haas on NVIDIA, I wanted to say that there were several key stakeholders in this IPO that bought a stake prior to ARM actually going public. And that included NVIDIA. It also included companies like Alphabet, Samsung, Apple, Microsoft, Intel. So you have these huge players backing ARM. So I thought it was really important to mention. But back to kind of why this IPO is so significant. Well, the IPO markets have been pretty dry. The environment isn't really ripe for deal making. At least, that's what it was in the beginning of the year, where people had concerns for economic growth. There were recession fears, geopolitical tensions, and of course, rising interest rates, which paint a really dismal picture for especially, tech companies that tend to take on a lot of debt to grow. So all of that kind of stalled a lot of IPOs. But with ARM's strong performance, that suggests that investor demand for IPOs could be coming back. And actually, in the coming weeks, there are a few companies that are scheduled to go public. You have the grocery delivery service Instacart that's scheduled, and
Right.
footwear Birkenstock. So if we have a few set of more successful IPOs, we might see an influx in 2024 as well.
Okay, that's interesting. And so, okay, just a shout out to Birkenstock, because are those like the most comfortable? I don't wear them anymore, but I used to love them as a little kid. I discovered them. So I'll be interested to see what happens there. And Instacart, I just don't live without Instacart. So I absolutely love. Thank you, Instacart, for delivering my groceries every day. So I always love to follow the money and zoom out. So Sequoia in 2021 changed their whole structure into Sequoia RA and became an evergreen so that they could stick with their investments through the IPO. Previously, they were only allowed to have a certain percentage of their portfolio in IPOs, and then they'd have to jump out as soon as they, were to hit massive growth. So I think Sequoia is definitely seeing something. They also went into that to get into crypto, but I think it's shines a positive light on the context of it, because they changed their whole structure, and that was in 2021. So that'll be interesting to see. So ARM's financial stability, despite the IPO, I do have some concerns. Do you see any concerns on your end first?
Well, so ARM's valuation came in pretty hot. And this is naturally a concern for some investors, because you don't want to be paying a premium valuation for the company, especially for the average retail investor or trader. It could be very volatile to get in in an IPO. The best time to get into an IPO is actually before the company goes public. And, the average retail investor doesn't generally have access to that. So I would say if there were any concerns, it would be the premium valuation, and it would be how the company's future growth trajectory looks like. So I'm sure there's going to be, I know there's going to be a lot of analysis, a lot of digging into ARM in the coming weeks, and we'll get a better understanding around the company and what its future looks like. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot of interest in that as investors learn more about the company.
And okay, so if you could just touch a little bit, you said something really important, that retailers don't have access to that timeline on IPOs. So could you just touch base on for someone just starting to trade, why is that?
Yeah, well, So how can you buy ARM's IPO? It's the same as buying shares of any publicly listed company. However, this is a very popular IPO, and the price is likely to fluctuate, and you may not get the price that you want. So that's something to keep in mind as investors are trying to trade, and how you're thinking about playing the company. But before a company goes public, the stakeholders that are given priority are, some of the big guys, like I mentioned before, like Alphabet, Samsung, Apple. These are, the starters that have access to getting kind of the better deal, before the company goes into the public markets. So the rules of the game, if you will, are kind of different, for different investors and companies and venture capitalists and things like that. And that is kind of on the pre-IPO private side. So that arena is a bit different than before the company actually goes over into the public side. And it can be even a little bit more risky for the average investor. So it all depends on what your risk tolerance is and how much money you're willing to put into it. But if the traders and investors are interested in ARM, maybe it's not the best time to buy right at the IPO, because it's just so volatile right now, and you don't want to be paying that premium valuation.
Interesting.
Yeah. So you might want to have the stock digest a little bit.
Got it. Level out until you jump in. So, NVIDIA, bringing NVIDIA up because they tried to buy ARM for 40-year mark, and they dropped out. However, their ownership is a quarter owned by BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street. And the interesting thing about ARM going after an IPO, it opens up for that kind of consolidation of ownership, possibly in the future. So as we see that level out, they might jump in. And then when you see the pre-IPO investments and you go, Yahoo Finance, go to holders, see who owns those companies, that percentage is probably quite steep. And so I always want to make sure that when we're looking at this, that we look at, it might look clean on paper, but who actually owns the two? And if the two are owned, what does that environment then look like? So I'm assuming Elon Musk is going to create his own chips. And, before we go there, we should just, ARM stands for Advanced Risk Machines, and RISC is Reduced Instruction Set Computing. So instruction set architecture is basically the IQ of how the hardware, the CPU, in the middle of the software and the hardware is this ISA, and that determines how a computer can work with software. And so if they own the majority of all of this, it really becomes something very serious. So it's really how computation is just, grounded. And then, so when you look at that, you want to see where our ISA is going with quantum computing. So go do your homework, look at NVIDIA and ARM and see if they have any projects together towards quantum computing. That'll be a really interesting find. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so any last thoughts on ARM for the day? Any suggestions? We have a lot of retail traders and, both advanced and beginners. I loved your tip is to wait for that IPO to level out. Any additional comments you want to send everyone?
Yeah, I would just say that it's a really exciting time for the tech sector, as artificial intelligence continues to be such a huge theme, and the ARM management were very strategic in going public at this time. But I would urge investors and traders to really do their homework, understand the anatomy of the company and how it makes its money, how it does business, who the key stakeholders are some of the key things that we spoke about today, and to and to dig into all that background before they develop their strategy on whether they're long-term investors or short-term traders. So I would say those are some of the fundamental things to keep in mind.
Okay, and then just before you go, because you are a world-renowned researcher, what are your go-to tools to find some of this out? What do you leverage?
Well, I think a great tool would be to go to your brokerage. A lot of the brokerages nowadays, they have a lot of great research tools, like different research notes or analysis around the company. So I would definitely leverage those. I like to use different tools. I don't know if different traders have access to this, like FactSet and Bloomberg Terminal. But another thing that's really helpful is if you just go on the company's website and look at their investor relations page. All that is public. You can even go on the Securities and Exchange Commission website where they have all the regulatory filings. All that is public information, and you can really dig into what the company does and what the risks are for the company as well, its competitors and so forth. So there's a lot of information out there. So I urge people to really dig in and do their homework and look into all that stuff.
That is such a great tip. And yeah, the 10Ks on SEC, that's a gold mine. So you can actually, they're accessible to everyone, and they just give you everything that you may not be able to find on the news. So thanks, Paulina. This has been such a fun show. I always look forward to Fridays. So thanks for coming on.
Same here. I'll see you next week. Thanks.
All right. Have a good one.
Bye.
All right, everyone. Thank you. Paulina was great. And again, these Fridays are so amazing. I am not going to profess that I am going to be on here without Lex. In fact, I just don't. It doesn't feel right. So we're going to sign off today. We're going to see Lex on Monday, and he is traveling. So we're going to vicariously think about all the fun that he's having. And thanks, Lex, for just making this a great show. You can tell the difference without you. You're amazing. All right. Thanks, Paulina, and we'll see you next time.